Good to see some familiar names again from previous webinars. I'd like to welcome you all to this latest version of our Advancing Employment webinar series. We continue to do our partnership with Vocational Rehabilitation on these first few sessions. Today, highlighting Vocational Rehabilitation's relationship with the Division of Developmental Disabilities. So in just a second, I'll hand everything over to Fiona, Kelly, and Cassandra so they can introduce themselves. But just to kind of reiterate what Lizzie was saying, I'll go ahead and monitor chat like I've done the previous webinars. So if you have a question, you want to put it into chat for me to ask for you, I will go ahead and monitor that and I will ask your question. As Lizzie said, if you would rather speak and ask your question yourself, please raise your hand and we will call on you. Okay, Fiona, it's all you.
All righty. Well, thank you for having us today. Today, as many of you know, we're going to talk about the Vocational Rehabilitation and Division of Developmental Disabilities partnership and how we work together to support individuals with developmental disabilities in being successful with employment. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and start moving forward. So I am Fiona Donahoe. I'm the statewide developmental disabilities coordinator, and I work for Vocational Rehabilitation. So I support all of our VR staff in working with DD clients. And then we also collaborate with the DD team. And on that note, I'll pass it over to Cassandra.
Hello, everybody. I'm Cassandra Avery, the Developmental Disabilities Specialist. I also work under the Vocational Rehabilitation umbrella and work closest with Fiona with our individuals for referrals from DDD to VR, and also helping with any questions for our team on that process. And I will pass over to Kelly to introduce herself.
Good afternoon. My name is Kelly Thomas, and I am the Employment Services Manager with the Division of Developmental Disabilities.
All righty. So the first slide we always like to start off with is this slide right here. And we share this slide because there's often a lot of confusion about, well, what's the difference between vocational rehabilitation and DDD? Sometimes folks think that VR is a vendor of DDD, but we're actually totally separate agencies with totally separate governing bodies. So DDD is its own entity, and they are governed by Access, which I'm not going to remember the name, what that acronym stands for, but it's basically the Medicaid source of
Arizona long-term care.
Great, thank you. Arizona. Well, there's Access is a little different than Arizona long-term care. They're related and they work together, but yeah, we'll talk about long-term care too a little bit later. And then vocational rehabilitation, we're under the Division of Employment and Rehabilitation Services. And then we're also under Rehabilitation Services Administration, which includes vocational rehabilitation. And we are a federally funded federally mandated state-run program. So our job, there's VR in every state, and our job is to work with folks with developmental disabilities, or with disabilities. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So that's just a little bit, we are totally separate agencies with our own eligibility criteria. So sometimes folks will a little confused by that, because we work so closely together. So we just wanted to share a little bit about that. And now I'm going to pass it over to Cassandra.
So to introduce the partnership between DDD and VR, we wanted to give a bit of information about employment first. So in 2016, the governor who was in office at that time had signed an executive order with implementing a vision and initiative that it's the first and preferred outcome for all working age individuals who have disabilities. So essentially giving them the right to competitive integrated employment, and that was signed in 2016. Governor Ducey was in at the time. Most recently, there's been some unofficial updates that they're working on. And once those are implemented, we'll be updating this slide. And then we wanted to give kind of a quick visual and overview of employment first and what does it mean. So because it's a vision and an initiative, there's several partnerships and team members that support the individual with their goal of gaining employment. So you have your professionals, you have your parents, you have your teachers, and your support staff at schools, you have your providers. And the important thing to remember is it's collaborative team effort to provide the supports for each individual that wants to be competitively employed. And we want to always keep in mind or keep with the belief that all individuals can work, provided they have the right supports. This slide has a bit more information about how can you as an individual, or how can we continue to support employment first? So what we can do to provide for employment first is we need to start with expectations. We have to have the expectation, expect and believe that all people with disabilities can work with the right supports. We need to promote informed choice, providing as much information to our members as possible so that they can make a decision that's right for them. That may include providing information how income may affect their benefits, partnerships, or through our specifically DD 101. How will this impact my benefits and how much I'm making? And then we want to date with new strategies and as well as community resources. I need to collaborate with our stakeholders, just school, vocational rehabilitation.
This is Cassandra. This is the interpreter. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're having a hard time hearing you.
My internet connection just told me it's weak. Is it better?
Sounds a little bit better now, Cassandra. We'll
Okay.
let you know again if it cuts out.
I apologize for that. Thank you. So what we really wanted to drive home here is just making sure that we're staying up to date on all the community resources and all the information so that we can best serve the individual who's coming for vocational rehabilitation services. I will go ahead and pass to Fiona.
Actually, I think you're going to pass to me.
Kelly. Okay.
No problem. So as a result of the Employment First Executive Order, DDD and VR took steps to strengthen their collaboration, cooperation, and communication in order to increase the employment outcomes for our DDD members. We also established a coordinated process to increase employment opportunities for our members to obtain competitive employment. Fiona?
Yeah, so a little more about our partnership. One of the things, as Kelly mentioned, that we started talking about, well, actually more revisited, is updating our memorandum of understanding and really strengthening that partnership and refocusing on that partnership so that we can best work together to serve DDD clients. So the first thing we did in that memorandum of understanding is we established some standards of practice. As Kelly mentioned, we have a standard of practice on communication and what's expected between both of our agencies to basically keep each other informed. You know, as Cassandra talked about with Employment First, one of the really important pieces of that is getting all the partners together to work together to support our mutual clients. So that's a really important piece. And then the next piece we did is we've really been working and continue to work on streamlining our referral process between our agencies. As I mentioned before, we're totally separate agencies and we each have our own eligibility requirements and processes and procedures. So we're really continually trying to work to make that referral process between our agencies as streamlined as possible. And then we also established information sharing practices. So what information should we be sharing so that we can all be on the same page and really, you know, because we each have a piece of the puzzle, right? So if one side doesn't know what the other piece of the puzzle is, sometimes it's hard to communicate, or sometimes one piece piece of the puzzle has information that the other one doesn't. So it's really good for us to be talking together and clear on what information we should be sharing. We also established streamlined referral process. I chatted with that a little bit. And one of the benefits of our partnership is expedited eligibility on the VR side. So we'll hear a little bit more, I think, about our process on the VR side a little later. But typically, our federal requirements is that we determine eligibility within 60 days of the person signing their application for our program. With our partnership, we have agreed to do our best to do that in half that time, so within 30 days. So that's an important piece to help us keep folks engaged while we're going through all of the administrative stuff to get folks on board and able to use our services. And then finally, DDD must refer to VR for competitive employment before DDD employment services can be authorized. So really, VR is looked at as the experts on working with folks with disabilities and helping them with employment. So DDD, while they may have some services, which you'll hear from Kelly a little bit later, for employment for DD clients, that's still a very small part of what DDD does. So VR is expected to be kind of the first stop. Let's see. So a little more about our interagency collaboration and who's involved. So you've met a couple of us already, the statewide developmental disabilities coordinator, which is myself, the developmental disability specialist, which is Cassandra. And we also have specialized VR counselors throughout the state. So almost every one of our offices has a counselor designated to take the DDD referrals or the referrals from DDD, so that you have somebody who is more familiar in working with that population and understanding what their special needs are. And then there's also a specific counselors, specialized counselors for working with youth. So we have multiple different types of populations we work with, but those are two of the main teams. The counselors who work with the youth, a lot of times the DD person will, if they're a youth, will be working with one of those counselors. We've kind of prioritized the transition team. So you may get counselors who are specialized DD counselor or a specialized youth transition team counselor. But that said, those counselors can work together to support folks who are both DDD and youth. And then on the DDD side, we have Kelly, the Employment Services Manager. And then there are 5 districts, and we have Employment Services Specialists for each of those districts. There's 2 for District North, there are 2 for District South, and then we have one for the west side of Phoenix, Central Phoenix, the central part of Phoenix area, and then the east side, all the way out to the east of the Arizona border. And then, of course, all the support coordinators who support the DDD clients. Okay, and now we're going to hand it off to Kelly. She's going to talk to you a little bit about the DDD services, eligibility, and employment services.
Exactly. Thank you, Fiona. Next slide, if we could. So the mission for DDD is to empower Arizonans with developmental disabilities to lead self-directed, healthy, and meaningful lives. And we truly believe that employment is a big part in fulfilling that mission. Slide. So let's talk a little bit about eligibility for our DDD members. If we could, thank you. So here are the qualifying diagnoses, with Down syndrome having been added late last year. Now these diagnoses have to have manifested themselves prior to the age of 18 and are likely to continue indefinitely. And the exception is children under the age of 6 may be eligible if they are at risk of a developmental disability and are demonstrating significant delays. So next slide, let's talk a little bit about the different categories for DDD members. We thought this was a great visual to show everyone. Now, ALTEX, which I think we kind of talked a little bit about before, is the Arizona Long-Term Care System. And that's an Arizona Medicaid program that is designed to help disabled individuals afford the care they need. Now, it's very important to know that DDD and ALTEX are very separate agencies. DDD can help make the connection to ALTEX, but they don't determine eligibility. So I just wanted to give that little disclaimer as we go through the categories. So Starting on the left, the DD only, as we normally refer to them, are not financially or medically eligible for access or All-Tex. So they are responsible for finding their own health insurance. Now, targeted, I think we've heard of targeted DDD members. Those are not medically eligible for All-Tex, but financially eligible for access. So they have access, but not All-Tex. And then All-Tex eligible members are both financially and medically eligible for All-Tex. And a vast majority of our members fall into this All-Tex eligible category. Next step, or next slide. So I mentioned support coordinators as one of our team members on the DDD side, and they are our case managers and are the primary contact for the members of any category that we previously mentioned, whether it's DD, targeted, or All-Tex eligible. The support coordinators meet with families on a regular basis. Usually the cadence is around 90 days, and they are responsible for explaining and advocating for members' rights on a regular basis. They facilitate those planning meetings, they assess for the needs and services, and they also develop the person-centered service plan. Next slide. And because the support coordinators are so very busy, Fiona had spoken about the 7 positions we have called employment specialists, and we're here to be the subject matter experts to help the teams with all things employment. So we can answer questions from support coordinators, members, or providers on services, what would be best for the members, resources, etc. We do outreach like we're doing today to educate the community on what is available. We can attend those planning meetings. We help with a VR referral connection, as well as authorizations for employment services. So let's take a moment to take a look at some of those services available through the division. The transition service that we offer is called Transition to Employment, and it's a classroom-based training that offers 17 modules that helps our members learn soft skills to get them ready for employment. Now, the program is very individualized, so if the member doesn't need all 17 modules, they don't need to take all 17. Members are not paid any wages for this service. There's supervision at all times, and it's usually at a 1-to-4 ratio. And the member can start as early as age 16 in this particular service. Now, if an All-Tex eligible member gains employment, the division has services and supports to help that member maintain employment. The first service is individual supported employment. And typically, I say typically, this service is utilized after VR has been able to ensure a member is stable in their competitive position, but they might need a little extra continued support. So we can put job coaching in under this service. Now, this service is also made available if for some reason our member is not found eligible for VR and they might need some support in job search activities. Another supported service we have is Employment Support Aid. And this service is offered on a 1-to-1 basis, not in a group. And it's available to meet a multitude of needs, from personal care, a member might need help with cutting up their lunch or medication reminders, to behavioral supports if that service is not available from that member's local clinic, or the traditional job coaching, or we say follow along job support. And Fiona did talk about the referral process that we have tried to streamline. And so we wanted to just give you a nice visual of what that looks like. So at a planning meeting, if a member is interested in competitive employment, the support coordinator will ask that member to complete a release of information, or the guardian, depending upon the situation. And that support coordinator will complete a referral packet. We will include things like the latest planning document, any medical, any behavioral health information, school records, anything that's going to help in that planning process for vocational rehabilitation. Then the support coordinator sends that to one of the 7 employment specialists that we've talked about for review, and that's reviewed for completeness and accuracy. And if all is well, we're going to send it to the point counselor, as Fiona had talked about, in the VR office closest to that member. And then VR is going to be reaching out within 3 business days to that member. They'll ask for their social security number and schedule to get that case opened, and then schedule an orientation to tell that member more about the VR program. Now, this is a typical way to be referred. It could be that one of our members is referred from another source, say school or behavioral health. In that case, VR is going to get that release signed, send it over through the employment specialist, and we'll get a packet together to help that VR counselor with the planning process for that employment plan. And with that, I believe I am turning it back over to Fiona. Sorry. Hold
No,
on.
it's gonna be Cassandra. That's fine. I did it to you too.
All right, Cassandra.
So I'm gonna just introduce the topic of vocational rehabilitation services. So we're gonna go through that information now. Let me turn on my camera. All right. So just to give an introductory, vocational rehabilitation is training and rehabilitative services for individuals starting at age 14 all the way up. And you might say, well, what do you mean all the way up? Well, we're not going to cut off somebody if they want to work. So wherever your cutoff number is for age, I say go with it. So we go 14 and up to help them become competitively employed. And the key is we want them to be earning at least minimum wage in those positions. So I wanted to highlight our pre-employment transition services. So our pre-ed services, they're provided to students age 14 to 22. They have to be enrolled in school or enrolled in some type of education to receive these services. It's important to note, though, that a student doesn't have to be a VR client to receive pre-ed services. We kind of consider this these skill building and these services that are provided as kind of a warm up to work. So it's building work skills, self-advocacy. The topics that will be covered, this topic's going to actually be covered by the transition team a little bit later at another date and time in another meeting. So they'll actually be able to give a lot more insight and information into the specifics of transition services. And so you'll see this again. And then this,
Sandra, sorry
go
for
ahead.
interrupting you. We have a question in the chat, so I want to give Kelly or somebody a chance to reply before we get too far off there. So the question is from Kim. She says, my daughter just started work training services with VR. She is also a DDD client. Do I need to wait until she obtains employment before requesting employment services with DDD?
I'll let Kelly take that one.
Sure. So I think it would depend upon what type of services that we were looking at. So this is a case that I'm hoping if she's getting services from VR, that VR has requested a packet from us so that we can have her on the radar. And then to invite an employment specialist to your daughter's next planning meeting to help with those conversations. So I wish I could give like a definitive answer, but I think it kind of depends upon where she's at in her employment journey.
And I can add too, because of our partnership, we should be communicating with the support coordinator so that we can work together and plan when that transition happens. So basically, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, but when it's time to transition your daughter back to DDD, because we're closing maybe the case successfully on the VR side, we should be having a meeting with DDD so that we can make sure they know that she's going to need that ongoing support. So it's everybody working together, and your VR folks and your DDD folks should be helping you plan that. So.
Can I jump in for a second here? I'm Carla. I'm a VR counselor with the Chandler office. My question would be, was your daughter referred to VR through DDD?
We can wait for her to put something in the chat, but yeah, that's a good point. So if If your daughter was not already referred to DDD, then I would be asking the support coordinator to do that referral to us if we haven't already gotten that process started. So yeah, it's really important to start with that referral so that the DDD folks and the VR folks know who each other are and can start having that conversation.
Yeah, it looks like they were a self-referral.
Okay, if they were a self-referral, then it's really important to tell the VR counselor that they're a DD client, and vice versa, tell the support coordinator that they're working with VR so that we can get that referral going and get everybody on the same page and working together. Yeah, good questions. All right. I think we were on that side.
Hey, Fiona.
Yes,
This
sir.
is Dave. I just had a question. I'm sorry, I had to step out for a second about the EA. So if we're doing supported employment with somebody, but somebody has, so our job coaches, obviously they teach, employment skills and how to master tasks and do task analysis. But if somebody has like, behavior issues that are kind of separate that the employer wouldn't follow, and can an EA work in conjunction with a job coach or support employment coach at the same time so that they're managing the vulnerability or behavior at the time that they're being taught the employment skills on a job, if the employer will allow it?
I'm going to let Kelly answer that one.
Are we talking employment support aid? Is that what we're referring to as an EA?
Yeah, I'm sorry. That was the only, yeah, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I just want to make sure I understood the question. So as far as we can take a look at that. If that's not a service that is available through VR and that is something that we need for that member to be successful, we can definitely take a look at that as a team for assessment. So I think it would be depending upon the situation and what was available through VR and what was not.
So maybe the team would just need to staff it, and then the support coordinator kind of staff it then with you guys. And
Right. And hopefully,
okay.
Again, the employment specialist would be invited to that meeting so that they could also help with that discussion.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't quite sure how far their duties went because I saw the behavioral support, and like I say, for our coaches, we don't have somebody that's ever going to look at the supervise the vulnerability or the behavior type stuff. They're going to be there to coach, and teach work skills and employment skills and how to work inside of the environment. So, but we've seen several people recently where those things are there, but that would help to eliminate us. They can help them move forward maybe. So. And I don't know how many hours that would be or anything else, because it probably is not going to be a lot of hours because they probably aren't able to work as many hours if they have those kind of limitations. But okay, thanks. No, good answer.
Sure, thank you.
Yes, good questions. So, and I'm sure there'll be a ton more. I think we're on this slide, and I believe you're covering that one, right, Cassandra?
Yeah, I got it. So this is just a slide to kind of show the similarities and differences between TTE and pre-employment transition services. I know that Kelly touched on TTE already, but we just want to note that the services are similar but different, and both can be provided at the same time, with the understanding that TTE is longer, it's more hours, and it's in a module format. Pre-ETS follows also like a format, but we're working with the individual and giving them the skills through kind of working on, what is the goal that they're looking at, or how are we manipulating out the employment goal from some of the skills that they already have, and then teaching those self-advocacy things. So it's not as much on a module schedule. It's more of just the pre-ETS vendor is working with an individual to go work with the skills and the job readiness. And with that, I'll actually change it over to Fiona.
Okay, so this is the overview of our process in VR. And you guys, I think, should have seen, if you attended some of the previous workshops, should have seen this already. But just a quick reminder of what our process is. We have orientation is always our first step. It's important to note that orientation is where the person gets to know what VR is, we show this slide, what our process is and so forth, so they know what to expect through the process. The second step is application and intake. So we do the orientation, the person says, yep, this is where I want to be. And then application and intake is an opportunity to meet with their VR counselor. The VR counselor is getting to know them, figuring out what are their strengths, what are their challenges. All of those things help the VR counselor get to know that person and how we can best support them. And it's also important to note here that the case is technically considered open once the person signs the application at intake. So sometimes folks think, well, I've been referred, but referral does not mean an open case yet. Then VR, as we talked about earlier, our federal regulations say that we're supposed to do eligibility within 60 days from the date that person signs their application. But in our partnership between VR and DDD, we have agreed to do that in 30 days. And we're pretty good at doing that in that 30 days or less time frame.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
When was that passed down to the VR counselors?
When was what passed out?
That we're now doing it in 30 days instead of 60 on eligibility
That's been part of our partnership for a few years now.
between DDD and VR?
Yep. Part of our that's one of the things we established in our standard work when we were revisiting our memorandum of understanding that we talked about earlier. So that's a great question.
Yeah.
Just like we do with behavioral health. It's the similar type of partnership, right? Our goal is to keep folks engaged and keep things moving forward. And for the most part, I don't think in the 2-3 years I've been doing this job, I don't think I've seen our numbers go really above the 30 days anyways. I think it's, even though we have 60 days to technically to do eligibility, we're really good at getting things done quicker. And part of the reason we're able to get things done quicker is because we do get all of those documents from DDD, hopefully in most cases right off the bat when we get that referral from them. So that's one of the things that makes it easier for us to do that expedited eligibility.
That's just interesting to me. I don't get as many DDD clients, but I had never heard it from our DDD VR. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Yeah, I think it's sometimes something that mostly just the point counselors, the DD point counselors know, the ones who are assigned to take or to receive most of our DD referrals. But we know there's a lot of staff who don't get a lot of the referrals, like in your situation, or they're working with a transition special counselor instead. So we're always trying to get that information out to everybody. So thanks for bringing that up. So once eligibility is done, that's when the counselor starts having the conversation with the person about, well, what are their job goals? What kind of work do they want to do? What kinds of supports do they need in order to achieve that job goal? So all of that goes into writing that person's plan for employment. And then once that plan is written, that's essentially when we can start providing services to help that person start looking for their job and getting ready for their job. And then ideally the person gets hired, but our services don't end at that point. Another really important piece of our partnership between VR and DDD is what we call supported employment. So once a person gets the job, our first step with most DDD clients is going to be getting that person a job coach. So Kelly kind of mentioned some of these services on the DDD side earlier, but we can provide that job coaching on our side too. And it's really individualized. That person might only need a little bit of job coaching, or they may need a lot of job coaching. Maybe at first they need full-time job coaching. But the idea and the expectation is once that person gets comfortable on the job, they're going to need less and less job coaching over time. So in most cases, we're looking for that person to get to a point where they've reached their maximum level of independence on that job. So meaning how much of the time can they be independent compared to how much of the time do they need that job coaching support to help them learn and keep on task and so forth. It may be different for each person. So when that person gets to a point where they only need a minimal amount of job coaching, then at that point is when VR and DDD are going to arrange a meeting. It's going to have the support coordinator from DDD, the VR counselor. It's going to have the family, whomever that person's supports are, the person, of course, and the people who are supporting him, like the job coach and so forth. And they're all going to get together and have a conversation about how things are going and figure out if they're all in agreement that that person has reached their job stability, right? They've learned their job, they've gained as much independence on that job as they're able to, and everybody is in agreement that they're doing great. So when that happens, the team will agree on what we call a transition date. So that transition date basically is the date where funding from VR ends and funding for DDD begins. So DDD is taking over that little bit of job coaching that person may need moving forward, because on the VR side, we don't keep cases open forever. We can provide this job coaching for quite a long time. We can provide this job coaching on the VR side for up to 24 months. I will say I've rarely ever seen, in fact, I've never seen it go that long. If a person still needs a lot of support after 24 months, then sometimes we're having conversations about if that's the right job match for that person, or, are there any other strategies that we need to look at to help that person be more successful? But basically, when that transition happens, then DDD would start taking over the job coaching, and we would, on the VR side, close that person's case successfully as of 90 days after that transition date that everybody agreed to. So that 90 days after the transition date, after the funding and the services transfer back to DDD, that's our opportunity to make sure things are still going well after that transition period. Because we know some folks have difficulties with transition and changes. And if the job coaches change, that can be a disruption for the person and so forth. So that kind of answers that question from earlier too, is at what point, should folks be talking to? At the very minimum, VR and DDD need to be talking at this point when that person is stable on the job, so that we can coordinate having the services transitioned back to DDD. And just a couple of notes on our lingo. So on the VR side, we refer to that job coaching after we close the case. We would call that extended supported employment or extended services. On the DDD side, that's the individual supported employment services, or the employment support aid services that Kelly was talking about earlier. So good to know each other's lingo, just in case, so that we know what we're talking about when we're communicating.
Hi, Fiona. Sorry, I'm jumping in for a second. A question came through from Pamela, and I think it's more of a question for DDD, but we may need to confirm what kind of job coaching you're talking about. So can a person receive job coaching when they are targeted or DD only? So I think both of you could probably answer this and clarify.
Great question. And I think I see Kelly unmuting.
Well, that's okay. So Pamela, they can receive job coaching from VR if they are targeted or DD only. However, the individual supported employment or employment support aid is available only to the All-Tex eligible members at this time.
Yeah, so that's a couple of things that brings up. One, VR doesn't care what level of eligibility the person has with DDD, right? We don't care if the person has All-Tex or not. What the challenge is, if they don't have All-Tex and they're target or DDD only, is we need to help that person find another source to fund that job coaching that the person will need after VR closure. So one of the big ones is potentially through Social Security. If the person has Social Security funds, they might be able to count the money spent on job coaching as an impairment related work expense, in which case DDD would not deduct that much from that person's Social Security funds. So as Cassandra was talking about earlier, that's another reason why it's really important to explore, what are the words I'm looking for? Explore programs like DB 101, which can really walk a person through what their benefits will be and how they could be affected by working. That's the easier option, but there are some other options for that long-term support after VR case closure. However, it does get more complicated. So it's really great if that person does have the All-Tex funding. If not, we need to work a little harder and get a little more creative with what the options are for that support after VR case closure. Did that answer the questions? I feel like there's something else I wanted to say, but
I appreciate the answer, because my caseload is all targeted in DD. And so I really love to refer people to VR, but I always wonder when they need a little extra help, because I know DDD doesn't pay for it after that because it's all text.
Right.
So I wondered how long, and I've never heard of those options before. So I'd love more information on those options if you guys have them.
Sure. I'd be happy to chat more about that. Like I said, the first stop I usually go to is Social Security. They also have, there are also employment networks. If a person has Social Security, a lot of times they have a ticket to work. And if that's the case, they, some of the employment networks, they're basically vendors in the community who are also vendors of Social Security, essentially, and they might be able to provide that long-term support as well. So that's the main one. Beyond that, we have to look at getting creative. Maybe that person has natural supports on the job, somebody who's willing to kind of help, every once in a while, help that person keep focused, or, whatever their challenges are. Maybe the family's able to pay for it. And there's also some community service agencies that might be options too, depending on the area. So like I said, it's a little more challenging when they don't have that all text, but there are definitely some options, and we all just need to get together and problem solve and figure out what the resources are.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. That's the short version. So anyways, so yeah, great questions, everybody. And also we have another area where VR, this is not on the slide, but we have another area in VR where VR can provide that long-term support specifically for youth ages 24 or younger, or up to 4 years, whichever comes first. So if they're a youth and they don't have all text funding, we don't have any funding anywhere else to get that long-term support after VR closes a case. If they meet all of those stipulations, VR can provide a fair amount of job coaching too for that long-term, but it's not used very often because in most cases, folks have the support elsewhere, but that is another option. Let's see here. Okay. Are we still, I think, okay. So as far as, are we at Cassandra? Are you going next or is it me?
It's still you.
Okay, thank you. Forget which slide we were on. Okay, so these are a variety of services that we might be able to provide. I want to stress that all of our services are individualized. So what Bob might get might be different from Sharon, from Angelica, because every person has a different job goal. Every person has different challenges and needs. So our services are very individualized. That's a really important piece. So for example, if somebody comes to us and they say, well, I want to get a job or I want to go to school, right? I want to get a college degree, but their job goal is to get a job at Safeway. We're not going to be able to support a college degree because you don't need a college degree to work at Safeway. But if the person wanted to be an engineer, then absolutely, yes, they're going to need a college degree in order to get that type of job. So that's a little bit of our thinking process. The things that are pretty universal for everybody that we serve are vocational counseling and guidance. That's working with their vocational counselor. And then most everybody is getting, where is it on here? Basically job development and placement services. So that's working with a job developer to help them find a job, help them do resumes, help them apply, help them work on their interview skills, and so forth. But it can also include things like career exploration. Maybe we need to do some assessments to help figure out what kind of job they would be good at. Assistive technology, maybe they need some assistance with something to help them be better at what they're doing. So somebody who's blind, for example, might need special software so that they can interact and understand what's on a computer screen. Maybe somebody who has difficulty with talking needs some kind of augmentative communication device so that they can communicate with their employers and go to interviews. So there's all sorts of things that we can do with assistive technology. And then you heard about some of these other services like pre-employment transition services. We can do in some cases, limited psychological counseling. We talked about the job coaching, and also services to help that person develop skills and strategies to address their disability related needs. So maybe, the person needs to understand their disability a little bit more so that they can understand how to best work with it and achieve some of the things that they want to achieve. So we've got a number of different services. This is not a full list, but it's some of the big ones that we often use. Okay. So, and I think Kelly is starting this off with this one.
I am, and I just wanted to say to Pamela real quick that please don't let the DD only or the targeted status keep you from referring, because we can again be very creative in follow-up supports for our members. So keep that in mind and reach out to your employment specialist for any other questions or guidance.
Okay,
So
prepare to have a lot of referrals, okay?
okay, we love that. We love that, love that. Thank you so much. So in summary, the collaboration between Voc Rehab and DDD looks something like this. Again, the support coordinators like Pamela are boots on the ground. They're having those planning meetings. They're having those discussions about employment goals. And then they are the ones usually referring to vocational rehabilitation. And from there, Fiona is going to talk about then the VR side.
Yeah. And then we did talk about that expedited eligibility that we do just to help move things forward more quickly. We talked about the extended support employment for all tax eligible clients. So that job coaching after VR is after the person has achieved job stability and we're ready to switch that person back over to DDD for that minimal job coaching they need to maintain their job long-term. And then both VR and DDD, we attend meetings with community partners. So here's your acronym soup for the day. The IEP with the school, the IPE, the individual plan for employment with VR, and the DDD planning meetings and so forth. And then these are just some of the resources which are very helpful. Some of these we have DDD and VR on here, Access, the Arizona's healthcare system. Arizona at Work is another great resource that's open to the community for anybody for help with finding jobs. DB 101, Cassandra mentioned earlier. So that is a fabulous website. There's a ton of information there, but what we usually point folks to first is they have a calculator. So if somebody has Social Security, they want to know how working might affect their benefits, they can plug in their information, not the personal information, but general information, like how much money they get from Social Security and how much money they want to make as a job. And it will give them a month-by-month play-by-play of how working will affect their benefits. And it will show you, the point of this website really is to show people how, even if they lose some of their money from Social Security, if they're working, they will always have more in their pocket, period. And it also shows what programs are available so they don't lose their benefits or can keep their benefits for quite a long time. So people are always better off when they're working, and that's really the beauty of that website. It just gives folks a play-by-play of what that looks like. Another really good one is the Job Accommodation Network. Job Accommodation Network is a great resource to go to. You can look up a specific type of disability and it will give us suggestions on what kind of accommodations might be appropriate for that person in the workplace. Or if you're not seeing what you're looking for on there, you can call them and employers can call them. It's a resource for everybody to help figure out accommodations for people with disabilities so that they can be successful in work. And then we also have Employment First. And many of you probably already know about Raising Special Kids, which is a fabulous support organization for parents who have children with disabilities. So many great resources and supports there. And then finally, this is how to get a hold of us. So on the VR side, we have the RSA phone number, toll-free 1-800-563-1221. And the RSA transition at azdes.gov inbox. And then on the DDD side, you have the toll-free line, which is 844-770-9500, and choose option 1. Or TTY, or TDD, you can dial 711. And then there's the DDD Customer Service Center at azdes.gov email. So And I believe that's what we have today. We've kind of been answering questions, but if you have more, please shoot. And I know they, the USAID folks would like to wrap up too, so we'll want a couple minutes.
Thank you, Fiona. Thank you, Cassandra and Kelly. Any final questions you guys want to ask them? Here's your opportunity.
Looks like there might be some in the chat, Abel.
So I see one here from Pamela. So I have a client that has had stable employment for 3 years, but gets a ride home with mom due to shift time and employment location. There's no public transportation available. The client needs a driver's license assessment. Why can't both agencies share the contract with Driving to Independence? Can I refer a client to VR for that service?
Okay, transportation is always a big one. Our services for driving, we are basically looking at the person's disability related needs. So do they, we're always trying to minimize expenses. So, we will want to try to pay for whatever is the least expensive. So we're always looking at public transportation as our first option. For driving services, our requirements for qualifying for that service have to usually relate to that person's disability related needs. So can that person not take other forms of transportation because of their disability? So say maybe the person can't use public transportation because their sense of direction is so bad that they can't figure out which way to go if they're taking a bus. Or maybe they get motion sickness and so they need to be able to drive for themselves. So those are some of the questions that we look at for determining if we can help with transportation and helping folks learn to drive on their own independently. It has to relate to that person's disability related challenges, if that makes sense.
Fiona.
Yes, ma'am.
Haven't we had a change of policy recently with respect to youth? That for youth, we can do a driving evaluation to ascertain if that individual would be safe to drive, safe behind the wheel. It's my understanding that we are doing those for our younger people to help identify if they can drive, if that is an option for them due to perhaps some of their disability related issues like attention issues or whatever.
That's a really good question. I wasn't aware of that, Betty. I know there have been some changes to the policy lately, but I don't remember hearing anything about the youth. So maybe that's something we can look into more.
Yeah, I would say that we should, because I believe they made that determination last fall.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it
well,
still requires, though, looking at public transportation availability and paratransit availability first. I don't think they pulled that out of the policy, that piece.
I think I saw Paulette unmuted for a moment too. Did you want to add something, Paulette?
No, that wasn't me. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Oh, it's a different Paulette. There's two Paulettes.
I think that's Mr. Dave Cheeseman hiding under Paulette's name. Clever Dave Cheeseman. So real quick, I know we're running short on time. I do want to point out, you're going to see an evaluation get put into the chat here in a second. Please take the time to, complete that. We're always trying to, improve our webinars and, provide you guys with information that benefits you. So again, please take the time to fill that out before you leave. And then just a quick update for me on what's coming up next. So next month, we'll continue our partnership with Voc Rehab and the transition team. So they'll talk about their relationships with school districts and how they serve youth around the state. We will be taking a short break just for the month of June from these webinars. And then we will start back up again in July. We'll have a session on Disability Benefits 101, the AZDB 101 website, coming up on that fourth Thursday in July. Thank you all for coming again today.